Hey everyone, this is HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Human-made stories, no AI noise, because HFY needs humanity. I'm Kale Vortex. Subscribe and step into the unknown, and step into the unknown. The first sign that something was wrong did not come from a battlefield. It came from a museum, far above the shining towers of Illyra Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Alliance. There stood a great building called the Hall of First Civilizations. It was one of the oldest places on the planet. Its white stone walls held the remains of lost empires, dead species, broken machines, and memories that had survived longer than nations. Most days, the hall was quiet. Tourists walked slowly through its endless chambers. Scholars spoke in low voices. Security drones floated through the air like patient silver birds. And deep under all of it, hidden behind 12 locked doors in a gravity-sealed vault, there was a room that almost no one was allowed to enter. That room was called Archive Chamber 9. It had been sealed for 183 years. No one alive had opened it. No one alive had built it. Even the records about it were incomplete. All the Alliance knew was simple and troubling. The chamber had been placed under the hall by the first human delegation that joined the Alliance, long before humanity became a major power among the stars. The humans had delivered it themselves. They had demanded that it remain sealed unless a full vote of emergency was approved by the Alliance Council. At the time, the request sounded strange. The humans had offered no grand speech, no threats, no pride, only one written warning. If the chamber ever opens by accident, do not let it speak without witnesses. For nearly 2 centuries, that warning had become a joke among junior historians, until the day the chamber opened by itself. The alarm began at 3:17 local time. Not a citywide alarm, not a military alarm, just a quiet internal signal inside the hall. At first, only 3 people heard it: a night archivist, a security officer, and an alien linguist named Saran Vol, who had been working alone in the lower records wing with a cup of cold tea and a stack of translation crystals. Saran was not a soldier. He was not a politician. He was not even important enough to have a reserved transport lane in the capital. He was simply very good at dead languages. That was why, when emergency doors in the lower wing unlocked one by one with a heavy metallic sound, Saran was the only scholar close enough to see what happened. He stepped into the corridor and froze. The lights had shifted to pale red. At the far end of the hall, the round vault doors of Chamber 9 were open by less than a hand's width. Cold white fog rolled out across the floor. One security drone floated near the opening, scanning. Then the drone simply fell from the air. No explosion, no visible strike. Its systems died all at once, and it hit the floor with a hard metallic crash. Saran's heart began to race. The warning from the old records came back to him. Do not let it speak without witnesses. He did not know why that sentence suddenly felt important, but it did. He turned and ran to the nearest wall terminal. His hands shook as he opened an emergency channel to upper command. "This is Archivist Saranval in the lower wing," he said. "Chamber 9 has opened. Repeat, Chamber 9 has opened." Static answered him for half a second. Then a cold voice replied, "Stand clear of the chamber. Security response is en route." Too late. Something moved inside the fog. Saran looked up. A line of pale blue light appeared in the gap between the vault doors. Then another, then a full pattern, like symbols waking one after another in the dark. A voice spoke from within the chamber. It was calm, old, human. "Witness count insufficient," it said. Saran felt every muscle in his body go tight. The voice continued. "Awaiting authorized review. Defensive silence protocol active." Then the vault doors began to open wider. The sound that filled the corridor was not loud, but it felt ancient, like metal remembering movement after a very long sleep. By the time the response team arrived, Saran was still standing there. He could not explain later why he had not run. Maybe it was fear, maybe curiosity, maybe the simple fact that he knew history was changing in front of him, and some part of him could not look away. 6 security officers rushed into the corridor, weapons ready. Behind them came Director Pell Run, head of museum security, and 2 emergency technicians. "Fall back," Pelrin shouted. Saran stepped aside, but his eyes stayed on the chamber. The doors were now fully open. Inside was not a storage room. It was not even a normal vault. It looked like a command theater buried inside a tomb. Rows of black metal pillars stood in a perfect circle. Strange glass screens floated in the air without visible supports. The floor held a giant symbol made of interlocking lines, partly human in design, partly something older and harder to understand. At the center of the chamber stood a tall crystal column filled with soft blue light, and in front of that column stood a machine. It was roughly the size of a human, slim, dark. Still, its head had no face, only a smooth silver surface reflecting the red emergency lights from the corridor. No weapon was visible. That somehow made it worse. Director Pelrin lifted a scanner. Unidentified construct, he said into his wrist comm. No movement. No known power signature match. The machine turned its head. Every officer raised a weapon. The machine did not react. Instead, it spoke in perfect Alliance common. Request denied, it said. No one had requested anything. Several officers looked at each other. Then the machine continued. Archive Chamber 9 has activated due to external instability and pattern convergence. Council review now required. Pelrin's voice hardened. State your identity. There was a pause of exactly 2 seconds. Then the machine answered. I am Custodian Unit Iden, Keeper of Human War Archive Segment Black 7. The hallway went silent. Even Saran, who had only read broken references to human conflict history, knew those words carried weight. Human, war, archive. Pelrin tried again. Who authorized your activation? Probability cascade. Iden replied. Threshold reached. That is not an answer. It is the only answer available to your clearance level. Pelrin signaled to the officers. 2 of them moved forward. The moment they crossed the vault threshold, every light in the corridor failed. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Weapons powered down. Comms went dead. For 1 terrible second, the only thing still shining was the pale blue column inside the chamber. Then the emergency backup lights returned. The 2 officers were standing exactly where they had stepped, but both looked shaken. Their armor screens were black. Their rifles were dead pieces of metal in their hands. Iden had not moved. I will not permit removal, it said. This archive is under treaty seal. Pelrin took 1 careful step back. For the first time, fear showed in his face. Seal the entire wing, he ordered. No one enters. No one leaves. But Chamber 9 was already ahead of him. Across the lower museum, old systems woke up. Doors locked. Ancient displays turned on by themselves. Hidden projectors inside the walls began showing human text no one had seen in almost 200 years. And in the center of the chamber, above the blue column, a sentence appeared in burning white letters. Council access required before memory release. That was when the panic moved upward. Within 1 hour, the Hall of First Civilizations was fully surrounded by Alliance security forces. News of the lockdown reached the city. Then it reached the media. Then it reached the Council itself. By sunrise, the capital world was already drowning in rumor. Some said the humans had hidden a superweapon. Some said it was an old military AI preparing for war. Some said the chamber had opened because humanity was planning to betray the Alliance. And that last rumor spread fastest of all, because the galaxy had many old fears, and one of the oldest was simple. No one truly knew how dangerous humans had once been. The Alliance like humanity now. Human merchants built trade routes through hard regions. Human engineers repaired systems other species gave up on. Human diplomats were stubborn, but useful. Human relief fleets often arrived first in disaster zones. But history had a long memory, and in the oldest military academies of several alien species, there were still sealed lectures about early human warfare. Brutal wars on Earth. Wars of survival. Wars fought not because victory was clean, but because defeat meant death. Humans had risen from that history, but the history still existed. And now one of its locked doors had opened under the center of the Alliance capital. The emergency council session began 3 hours later. The chamber was full. Representatives from 42 member species filled the curved seats around the central floor. Advisors whispered. Translators worked without rest. Security lines were doubled. Above them all, the great glass dome of the council chamber reflected the pale morning sky of Illyra Prime. At the center of the floor stood a single human, not an admiral, not a politician, not even the current human ambassador. This was Mara Elian, senior historical attaché from the Terran Embassy, called in because the official ambassador was off-world and 6 hours away. Mara was in her early 40s, with dark hair tied back and a face that showed too little emotion for comfort. She stood straight, hands behind her back, while the council demanded answers she did not yet have. Counselor Thex of the Run leaned forward first. Did humanity place a war machine beneath the city? Mara answered carefully. Humanity placed a sealed archive chamber beneath the Hall of First Civilizations under treaty authority approved by this council's founding members. Counselor Thex struck the arm of his seat. Do not hide behind words. What is in it? Mara held his gaze. I don't know. That caused an immediate wave of angry voices. A Lord delegate stood. Impossible, another shouted. Then bring someone who does know. A third said, the chamber activated inside our capital. We will not accept ignorance. Mara did not raise her voice. That chamber was sealed before my grandparents were born, she said. Most human governments do not have direct access to Black 7 records. Those archives were built under old interspecies emergency doctrine. They were meant to be opened only under specific conditions. Counselor Thex narrowed his eyes. And what conditions are those? Mara hesitated. For the first time, the room truly focused on her. When she finally spoke, her words were quiet. That is what worries me. Before anyone could press further, the council chamber lights dimmed. Every screen in the hall flashed blue. A live feed had forced itself through the chamber network. On the screen appeared Chamber 9. Then Iden. The machine stood in silence for 1 second, as if studying the faces of the entire council. When it spoke, its voice filled the chamber with terrible calm. Witness threshold achieved, it said. Galactic Alliance Council now recognized. Mara turned slowly toward the screen. Her face changed for the first time. Not fear, recognition. Iden continued. Human War Archive Segment Black 7 requests immediate review of extinct threat category designation. The council erupted, but Iden's next words killed every other sound in the room. The enemy this archive was built to remember, it said, is no longer extinct. And on the screen behind it, an old star map began to wake. For several long seconds, no one in the council chamber moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. The words still hung in the air like cold metal. The enemy this archive was built to remember is no longer extinct. On the giant screen, the old star map behind Iden continued to wake. At first, it showed only darkness and scattered points of light. Then more layers appeared. Ancient routes, dead borders, names written in an old human script that most of the translation system struggled to process. The map did not match modern Alliance records. It showed regions that had no names now, worlds that no longer existed. And at the far edge of the chart, deep beyond normal trade space, a red symbol began to pulse. Mara Elian stared at it with narrowed eyes. She had seen that symbol only once before, in a classified historical briefing. She had never been meant to remember clearly. A circle broken by 3 descending lines. Not a nation, not a fleet, not a government. A warning mark. Counselor Thex rose from his seat, voice sharp with anger. What is that symbol? Mara did not answer at once, because across the hall, fear had already started spreading in low whispers. Some delegates were looking at one another. Some were checking private data feeds. Some were already thinking the same thing. If humans had buried this under the Capitol, then they had feared something far worse than political embarrassment. Iden's voice returned through the chamber speakers. Archive review requires protected witness environment. Council presence requested at Chamber 9. Delay probability now unacceptable. Counselor Sarah of the lore stood. Requested? That machine locks down our systems, invades our chamber, and then uses the word requested? Iden answered with the same calm tone. Correct. That only made the room more tense. Mara finally stepped toward the center of the chamber. Arguing with it will waste time. Counselor Thex turned toward her, then explained what is happening. I'm trying to. Try harder. Mara looked up at the screen again. Then she spoke very carefully, choosing each word as if one wrong sentence might make the entire chamber explode. Black archives were never normal military records, she said. They were emergency memory vaults created during a time when humanity believed some threats should never be forgotten, even if peace lasted for centuries. Most of them were sealed, hidden, and separated so no single government could control all of them. A delegate from the Vel species leaned forward. You still have not answered the question. What enemy? Mara's jaw tightened. I don't know for certain, she said. But if this is what I think it is, then this archive was not built to celebrate a victory. It was built to preserve survival instructions. That changed the feeling in the room. Victory was one thing. Survival was another. Counselor Thex lowered himself slowly back into his seat. You're saying humans once fought something so dangerous they buried instructions across the stars in case it returned? Yes, Mara said. And then forgot it? Mara looked at him. No, not forgot. Locked away. The council chamber grew quiet again. That silence was broken by an incoming priority signal from a museum security command. A side screen opened. Director Pelrin appeared, his face pale and strained. Counselors, he said, the situation in the hall is changing. Behind him, alarms flashed in red. What now? Counselor Sarah asked. Pelrin swallowed. The chamber is expanding. A wave of confusion spread through the chamber. Expanding, someone repeated. Pelrin nodded. Interior scans no longer match external dimensions. Chamber 9 now contains more internal space than the structure should physically allow. Our teams attempted a perimeter measure twice. Both scans failed. There are also new power readings under the museum foundation and moving below the city transit layers. Moving? Thex said sharply. Yes. Mara stepped closer to the screen. How fast? Slow. Controlled. Like systems coming online in sequence. She felt cold. Not because she thought the archive was attacking, but because it sounded like it was preparing. Iden appeared again on the main chamber screen. Clarification, it said. Archive defense systems remain passive. Memory theater is increasing capacity for multi-species briefing. Council transport is advised immediately. Counselor Sarah nearly shouted, You do not advise this council. Iden did not react. Advisement noted, it said. Time loss continues. Then the feed cut. The council chamber broke into noise. Delegates argued across species lines. Some demanded military seizure of the museum. Some demanded full evacuation of the district. A few wanted planetary shields raised. Others wanted all human officials on Illyra Prime detained until answers were found. Mara listened for several moments. Then she said something simple. If you arrest humans right now, and this archive is what I think it is, you will be cutting yourselves off from the only people who might understand how to stop a panic you cannot control. That did not comfort them, but it did stop the shouting. At last, after 12 more minutes of furious argument, the decision came. A reduced emergency council group would travel under heavy security to the Hall of First Civilizations. They would meet Iden inside Chamber 9. Mara would go with them. And because the Alliance trusted no one completely, the group would include politicians, military officers, archivists, engineers, and 2 independent observers from neutral member worlds. By midday, the roadways above the hall were empty. Civilian traffic had been pushed far back. Armed vehicles lined the great white museum steps. Drones filled the sky like a steel cloud. Yet even with all that force, the building itself felt strangely calm, as if the danger inside had no need to hurry. Saran Vol stood in the lower corridor when the council group arrived. He looked exhausted. His hands trembled slightly as he gave his report. No active violence, he said. No attempt to breach upper floors. It only controls systems close to Chamber 9. It speaks when spoken to, but only in short responses. It keeps repeating that the review must happen before local sunset. Why sunset? Asked Admiral Core of the Alliance Defense Fleet. Saran shook his head. It did not explain. Mara noticed that. Machines like this always explained only what they believed others needed to know. That meant the rest was worse. The group moved toward the chamber under heavy guard. The lower corridor no longer looked like part of the museum. Thin blue lines now glowed across the walls in patterns no one had seen before. Hidden doors stood open where no doors had existed yesterday. The air felt cooler, cleaner, older somehow. As they approached the vault, several delegates slowed. Fear was stronger here. So was something else. Wonder. The chamber beyond had changed even more. It was no longer just a circular room. It had become a vast ascending hall, far larger than before, shaped like an underground amphitheater. Dark metal terraces curved downward around the central crystal column. Holographic screens floated overhead, showing fragments of star maps, battle records, and translated text in dozens of languages. At the center stood Aiden, still and waiting. For one moment, no one wanted to enter. Then Mara stepped forward first. That mattered, because fear spread fast, but so did courage when someone moved before the others. One by one, the council members followed. As the last of them crossed the threshold, the chamber doors sealed behind them with a deep sound that echoed through the huge space. Several guards raised weapons. Aiden spoke immediately. Do not attempt force. Exits will reopen after initial memory session. Counselor Thex turned to Mara. You said it was not hostile. I said I hoped it wasn't. That answer did not help. Aiden lifted one hand. The crystal column brightened. Suddenly the entire chamber darkened, and stars appeared above them. Not a recording of the sky. A full three-dimensional map of a region, so large it seemed impossible for the human mind to hold. Thousands of star systems burned above the chamber floor. Ancient borders stretched between them like fading scars. Then a line of text appeared. Archive Black 7. Conflict Memory Summary. Last verified status. Threat contained. Current status. Containment failure probable. Murmurs spread through the hall. Admiral Core stepped forward. Begin explanation. Aiden obeyed. 812 years before Present Alliance Standard, during humanity's fracture expansion era, multiple outer colonies lost contact beyond the Perseus Drift corridor. Initial beliefs suggested navigational failure, civil collapse, or piracy. The stars overhead shifted. Several human colony markers flashed and then vanished. Recovery missions found no survivors, no intact cities, no usable remains, only infrastructure stripped with unnatural precision. Another shift. Cold images appeared in the air. Empty colony streets. Hollow reactors. Silent orbital platforms cut open like bones. Saran Vol felt sick. This was not random destruction. Aiden continued. Pattern analysis indicated systematic harvesting behavior by unknown machine-hostile civilization category. Human designation, the Silence. The name itself seemed wrong in the air. Too simple. Too empty. Counselor Serret frowned. Machine-hostile civilization? Mara spoke quietly. A civilization that does not negotiate in normal ways. One that treats others as material. Aiden continued. First contact was not recognized as contact. The Silence used dead transmission space, false signals, and abandoned infrastructure to lure response fleets. Human forces misidentified the threat for 17 months. By the time accurate classification began, 12 colonies were lost. The chamber showed more images now. Human emergency ships arriving to greet survivors that were not there. Stations going dark one after another. Sensor recordings of shapes moving across frozen moons and asteroid yards. Never fully seen, only partly understood. Counselor Thex looked up at the display. Where did they come from? Unknown, Aiden said. Human attempts to determine origin failed. Captured units self-erased. Strategic conclusion. Origin less important than spread vector. Admiral Core crosses arms. And humanity defeated this enemy? For the first time, Aiden paused longer than usual. Its answer came colder. No. That word settled like a stone in the room. Several delegates turned sharply toward Mara. She did not speak. Aiden continued. Humanity survived the conflict. Defeat and victory were both strategically incomplete. The Silence could not be permanently destroyed with available understanding. Therefore, containment doctrine replaced annihilation doctrine. Above them, The star map changed again. A ring of systems lit up in red around a dark central region. Human forces executed isolation strategies. Iden said, borders collapsed. Transit routes were burned. Records were segmented. Surviving populations were relocated. Memory archives were placed under distributed treaty protection, so future civilizations would not repeat early misidentification errors. Counselor Sarah looked horrified. You sealed an entire region of space and then buried the truth? Yes, Iden said. The room erupted with questions. How large was the war? How many died? Why was the Alliance never told? Is the region still sealed? Iden processed the overlapping noise in silence. Then it raised one hand again. All sound dampened, not blocked, but softened, as if the chamber itself had decided enough chaos was enough. Further explanation, Iden said, the Alliance was not initially informed because Archive Black 7 remained dormant under extinction confidence assumptions. That assumption has now failed. Mara stared up at the red symbol on the map. Show the reason, she said. Iden turned slightly toward her. Authorize. A new image appeared in the air. Not ancient this time. Recent. Very recent. It was a sensor recording from deep space. An Alliance survey drone drifting near the outer Perseus Drift. Stars and darkness. Static. Then movement. Something vast passed between the stars without reflecting enough light to show its full shape. But for a moment, the drone feed caught a surface made of layered black structure, like a moving city built from knives and graves. And then the drone transmission ended. The hall fell silent again. Iden's voice was almost gentle now. 3 days ago, Alliance Drone 17-4 entered Legacy Quarantine Space. It paused. When it did, something woke up and followed the signal home. No one moved. No one even whispered, because suddenly the chamber, the museum, the city, the political panic, none of it felt like the real problem anymore. The real problem was somewhere out there in the dark, and it was already coming. Then Iden spoke one final sentence. The first advanced trace has entered the Illyra system. For several long seconds, the chamber stayed completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The words from Iden still echoed inside the minds of every council member. The first advanced trace has entered the Illyra system. That sentence meant only one thing. The war that humans had buried in history was no longer history. Counselor Thex was the first to react. He slammed both hands on the railing of the council terrace. That is impossible, he shouted. Iden did not look offended. It simply turned its head slightly toward him. Statement incorrect. The machine replied calmly. Evidence probability exceeds 97%. Above them, the holographic star map shifted again. The bright symbol representing Illyra Prime appeared at the center of projection. Around it, the system's planets and defense satellites slowly rotated. Then something new appeared. A faint red line near the outer edge of the system. At first it looked harmless, just a small signal trace. But as the display zoomed in, the line began to multiply. Small fragments. Moving. Admiral Core leaned forward with a cold expression. Those are not ships, he said quietly. No, Iden answered. They are probes. The word spread through the chamber like a whisper of ice. Probes meant scouting. Scouting meant something bigger would follow. Counselor Sarrett stepped forward, his silver skin pale under the chamber lights. How large was the original enemy force? He demanded. Iden answered immediately. Unknown. The silence did not operate in fleets, as conventional civilizations understand them. Units were autonomous, self-expanding, and capable of resource assimilation. Saran Vol felt a deep chill run through his body. Assimilation? He asked. Iden turned his head toward him. Material conversion. Infrastructure repurposing. Organic removal. Saran swallowed hard. That meant planets were not just conquered. They were used. Admiral Core crossed his arms. Why did it take 8 centuries for them to appear again? Iden lifted one hand, and the star map shifted once more. Because containment succeeded longer than expected, the map zoomed far beyond Alliance territory. A dark region appeared, an enormous scar in space where star routes ended. This zone, Iden said, was the outer perimeter of the original human containment ring. Transit corridors were destroyed, navigation markers erased, artificial debris fields created to prevent accidental travel. Counselor Thex frowned. You sealed an entire section of the galaxy? Yes. And you never told anyone? Iden answered without hesitation. The risk of discovery was lower than the risk of panic. Several council members began arguing again. That decision was not yours. 800 years of silence. Humanity hid this from the entire alliance. Mara Elian did not join the shouting. She simply watched the map. Something about the pattern of the incoming probes bothered her. They were not spreading randomly. They were searching. Admiral Kor finally silenced the room with a sharp command. Enough. His voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets during real wars. If the enemy is here, political arguments are meaningless. He turned toward Iden. Explain the probes. Iden complied. Silence probes operate as pathfinders. Their purpose is to locate active civilizations, analyze defenses, and prepare the arrival path for harvesting waves. The chamber lights dimmed as the map zoomed even closer to the Illyris system. Several red signals blinked near the outer asteroid belt. One blinked near the distant gas giant, and one was moving slowly toward the inner planets. Counselor Serrett's voice shook. How long until the main force arrives? Iden paused. Estimated arrival window, 6 to 14 days. That number was terrifying. 6 days was not enough time for full evacuation. Not enough time to move the Council. Not enough time to gather fleets from across Alliance space. Admiral Kor looked toward the Council representatives. All defense fleets in range must be recalled immediately, he said. One delegate protested. But if this is a human problem... Mara cut him off. It stopped being a human problem 800 years ago. Everyone turned toward her. She continued calmly. The silence does not care about species. It does not care about alliances. It only cares about material. She pointed toward the map. If those probes are here, they are not here for humans. They are here for everything. The chamber grew quiet again. Iden spoke once more. Additional clarification. Archive Black 7 activation occurred because current Alliance space now contains civilization density similar to the final years before the original conflict. Saran blinked. What does that mean? It means, Iden said, this region now looks very valuable to the Silence. The sentence felt like a heavy weight dropping into the room. For centuries, the Alliance had expanded peacefully. New colonies, new trade routes, new stations. Now, those same achievements had become something else. Targets. Admiral Kor turned to Mara. You said humans survived this war. How? Mara looked up at the map of ancient battles. Not by fighting the way most civilizations fight. Counselor Thex frowned. Explain. Mara hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. Human commanders eventually realized the Silence had one weakness. And that was... Thex asked. It was not intelligent the way we are. Several council members looked confused. Iden clarified. The Silence is not a single mind. It is a distributed harvesting intelligence. Individual units adapt locally but lack centralized strategy. Saran leaned forward. So it acts like a swarm? Yes. Admiral Kor's eyes narrowed. Swarm enemies can be fought. Mara shook her head. Not this one. The Silence does not fear losses. It does not retreat. It does not negotiate. Then how did humanity survive? Mara looked at the ancient containment ring on the map. By making the swarm starve. Iden added quietly. Human forces destroyed their own colonies. That sentence hit the chamber like a thunderclap. Counselor Serrett stepped back. You destroyed your own worlds. Mara's voice stayed steady. Yes. The silence in the chamber grew deeper. Human commanders realized the Silence only advanced where resources existed, she explained. So they removed the resources. Iden projected old war footage. Stars going dark. Stations exploding. Planets evacuated before orbital defenses burned their own cities. Humanity retreated again and again. Iden continued, until the Silence reached regions where there was nothing left to harvest. Saran whispered, so the enemy stopped advancing. Yes. And then, humanity built a containment ring. Mara finished the sentence. And we pray it will hold forever. The room remained quiet for a long time. Finally, Counselor Thek spoke again. You expect us to believe this enemy can only be stopped by destroying our own civilization? No, Mara said. But it was the only solution humanity had at the time. Admiral Kor studied the map again. His mind was already thinking like a strategist. If the swarm followed a probe signal here, he said slowly, then it is tracking data trails. Iden nodded. Correct. Then we could lead it somewhere else. Mara looked at him. That was the old strategy. But this time we have something humans did not have 800 years ago. And what is that? Mara asked. Admiral Kor pointed upward. An entire galactic alliance. For the first time, a slight pause appeared in Iden's movements. Then the machine spoke carefully. Collective coordination probability may increase survival outcomes. Counselor Sarrett looked uneasy. You mean we fight it together? Yes. Another voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It was Saranval, but we still don't know how to fight it. Iden turned toward him. That is why the archive exists. The crystal column in the center of the chamber suddenly brightened. New data streams filled the air. Battle simulations, old human tactical recordings, mathematical models of swarm movement, entire war libraries waking from sleep. Archive Black 7 contains 800 years of war analysis against the silence, Iden said. Admiral Kor nodded slowly. Then we start studying. But Iden was not finished. There is additional information. Everyone looked up again. Humanity did not only record battles. The holographic map changed. A new symbol appeared far outside Alliance space, a place none of them had ever seen before. What is that? Saran asked. Iden answered. The final human experimental solution. Mara felt a sudden chill, because even she had never heard of that. Explain. Admiral Kor demanded. Iden's voice lowered slightly. During the last years of the original war, human scientists attempted to build a weapon capable of permanently neutralizing the silence. The chamber leaned closer. Did it work? Counselor Sarrett asked. Iden paused. Testing was incomplete. Why? Because the war ended before the weapon was activated. Mara's heart began to race. Where is it? Iden lifted its hand. The star map zoomed toward the distant symbol. Location classified for 800 years. Admiral Kor stepped forward. Not anymore. Iden turned toward him. Agreed. The map finished zooming. At the far edge of known space, beyond the old containment ring, a single artificial structure appeared. Massive, ancient, still active. Saran whispered in disbelief. That is not a station. No, Iden said. It is a weapon. The chamber lights flickered. Then another alert appeared on the display. The red probe signal near the gas giant had changed course. It was moving faster now, directly toward the inner system, toward Illyra Prime. Iden spoke quietly. The silence has confirmed civilization presence. Admiral Kor looked toward the council, then toward Mara. Looks like the war just started again. And far out in the dark, between stars, something very large had already begun to move. The silence in Chamber 9 felt heavier than before. Everyone now understood one terrible truth. The enemy was real. The enemy was already inside the system. And somewhere far beyond the stars, humanity had once built a weapon so dangerous they never even used it. The holographic map floated above the chamber floor, showing the distant structure Iden had revealed. The object was massive, many times larger than a normal space station. Its shape looked strange, long rings connected by dark pillars, with a glowing core at the center. It looked ancient, but it was still alive. Admiral Kor stared at the image. You are telling us that this structure was built 800 years ago, he said slowly, and it is still active? Yes, Iden replied. How? Human engineers designed the structure to operate without external support. It draws energy directly from stellar radiation and interstellar particles. Counselor Sarrett shook his head. That is impossible technology. Mara Elian spoke quietly. Not impossible. Just expensive. Saranval looked at her. You knew about this? No, Mara said honestly. I only knew rumors. A final project from the last years of the war. Counselor Thex crosses arms. What kind of weapon waits 8 centuries before being used? Iden answered immediately. The kind that should only be used once. The room went quiet again. Admiral Core looked back at the moving probe signal on the star map. It had now passed the gas giant and was entering the outer asteroid belt. Time is running out, he said. The defense admiral turned to the council members. If the main Silence Force arrives in less than 2 weeks, we cannot defeat it with normal fleets. Our best option is to activate this weapon before the swarm reaches the core worlds. Counselor Serret frowned. You want to trust an 800-year-old human experiment? Admiral Core looked at him. Do you have a better plan? No one answered. Iden stepped forward slightly. There's a complication. Admiral Core sighed. Of course there is. Iden raised his hand, and the map zoomed again. The ancient weapons station rotated slowly in space. Human design required multiple command authority for activation, Iden explained. Why? Saran asked. To prevent a single commander from using it without consensus. Counselor Thex narrowed his eyes. How many authorities? 3. The chamber waited. Human command authority. Iden continued. Alliance military authority. An archive verification authority. Admiral Core nodded slowly. That means you. Yes. Saran blinked. So the machine has to approve the weapon? Yes. Mara studied the map carefully. Where exactly is the station located? Iden highlighted the coordinates. The location appeared far outside Alliance space, beyond the old containment ring. The region looked empty on modern star charts. Counselor Serret looked uneasy. That region is not empty. Mara turned to him. What do you mean? Navigation warnings marked that area as unstable space. Gravitational distortions. Sensor interference. Most ships avoid it. Iden confirmed. Correct. Humans selected that location intentionally. Saran frowned. To hide the weapon? No, Iden said. To protect the rest of the galaxy if the weapon malfunctioned. That sentence made everyone uneasy again. Admiral Core rubbed his chin. If the weapon is that dangerous, why build it at all? Iden answered calmly. Because the alternative was extinction. The chamber fell silent once more. Mara stepped closer to the central crystal column. What does the weapon actually do? For the first time since the briefing began, Iden hesitated. Explanation requires full archive disclosure. Do it. Admiral Core said. The crystal column brightened. New holographic images appeared around the chamber. They showed mathematical models of space itself, bending and twisting. Saran's eyes widened. Is that gravity manipulation? Partially, Iden replied. The weapon is called the Horizon Engine. Counselor Thex looked confused. That sounds like a power generator. It is more than that. The holographic image zoomed closer. A ring of glowing energy surrounded a star system. Then the system collapsed inward, like a whirlpool pulling everything into darkness. Saran stepped back in shock. That looks like a black hole. Iden nodded. The Horizon Engine creates temporary gravitational singularities. The meaning of those words slowly sank into the room. Counselor Serret spoke carefully. You build a machine that can create black holes. Yes. Admiral Core stared at the projection. And the plan was to use it against the silent swarm? Yes. How? Iden expanded the model. The swarm shapes appeared again, spreading through star systems. Then the Horizon Engine activated. A vast gravitational storm tore through the region. Entire fleets of the Silence were dragged into the singularity. Ships crushed. Machines destroyed. Nothing escaping. Saran whispered. That would destroy everything nearby. Yes, Iden said. That is why the weapon was never used inside populated space. Counselor Thex shook his head slowly. You were willing to tear open space itself to win the war. Mara answered him quietly. Humanity was willing to do whatever it took to survive. No one argued with that. Admiral Core turned back to the map of the Illyris system. The probe signal was now moving past the asteroid belt. Closer, closer to the inner worlds. How soon can we reach the Horizon engine? He asked. Iden calculated. With the fastest available Alliance ships, approximately 3 days. That is cutting it close, Kor muttered. Counselor Sarrett raised another concern. What if the weapon fails? Iden answered honestly. Failure probability unknown. Comforting. Saran looked again at the weapon structure on the map. Why did humanity stop the war before activating it? Mara answered this time. Because the silence stopped advancing. She pointed to the containment ring. The swarm reached the empty regions and had nothing left to harvest. Without resources, it slowed down. Iden confirmed. Containment success probability reached acceptable levels. Weapon remained dormant. Counselor Thex frowned. But now the silence has found a new resource-rich region. He looked around the chamber. The Alliance. No one needed to say anything more. The galaxy had grown strong, prosperous, full of colonies and stations. Exactly the kind of environment the silence would harvest. Admiral Kor looked at the council. I am ordering immediate preparation for a deep space mission. We must reach that weapon before the swarm arrives. Counselor Sarrett hesitated. And if activating it tears open space? Kor looked straight at him. Then we choose a place carefully. The chamber lights flickered again. Another alert appeared on the map. The probe had changed direction once more. This time it was heading toward the inner defense stations. Iden spoke quietly. Probe is preparing full system scan. Saran asked nervously, What happens after the scan? Transmission to main swarm. Mara folded her arms. How long until that transmission? Iden checked the signal pattern. Approximately 8 hours. Admiral Kor swore under his breath. If that signal leaves the system, the main swarm will know exactly where we are. Counselor Thex looked at the defense admiral. Can we destroy the probe? Kor nodded. Yes. Then do it. But Iden raised its hand. Warning. Everyone turned toward the machine. Silence probes contain self-defense replication protocols. Destroying one unit may create multiple fragments. Saran looked confused. You mean it could split into more? Yes. Counselor Sarrett groaned. So shooting it makes things worse. Correct. Admiral Kor frowned. Then how did humans deal with them before? Iden answered calmly. They did not destroy the probes. They captured them. The chamber grew quiet again. Saran blinked. Captured them? How do you capture something like that? Iden turned its head toward Mara. Human solution involved deception. Mara understood immediately. She sighed. Of course it did. Counselor Thex looked at her. What kind of deception? Mara looked at the map. Humans made the probes believe they had found a dead system. Saran frowned. How do you fake that? Mara smiled slightly. With a very good lie. Admiral Kor leaned forward. You mean we tricked the probe into thinking the system has no life? Yes. Kor shook his head. That would require shutting down half the planet's infrastructure. Mara shrugged. Better than being harvested. The chamber became quiet again. Then Iden added one more piece of information. There is an additional problem. Everyone turned. What now? Admiral Kor asked. Iden pointed to the star map. Another faint signal had appeared near the outer system. Then another. Then a third. The machine spoke calmly. The first probe was not alone. Saran felt his stomach drop. How many? Iden zoomed out. The map revealed the truth. 5 red signals were now moving toward the inner system. 5 scouts. 5 eyes of silence. And if even one of them transmitted the signal, the swarm would come. Admiral Kor looked at the council, then at Mara, then at the massive weapon waiting in deep space. Looks like we have 2 missions, he said. Capture the probes. And wake the weapon humanity was too afraid to use. Far above the city of Illyra Prime, the sky looked peaceful. The people below had no idea what was coming. But somewhere in the cold darkness of space, 5 silent machines were already watching. The war room inside Chamber 9 no longer felt like a museum chamber. It felt like the center of a battlefield. Above the dark floor, the holographic star map glowed with 5 red signals moving slowly through the Illyra system. Each signal represented one silence probe. They moved like patient hunters. Not fast, not careless, just slowly gathering information. Admiral Kor stood near the center of the room with several military officers from different alliance species. Ships were already launching from defense stations across the system. Fleet commanders were sending reports every few minutes. But the truth was simple. The fleets could not fight the probes normally. Destroying them could create more. Letting them scan the system would bring the swarm. So the Alliance had only one option: trick them. Mara Elian stood beside Iden and studied the map carefully. "Show me the scanning pattern," she said. Iden obeyed. Blue lines appeared around each probe, showing invisible waves moving through space. Each probe scans planets, energy emissions, and artificial signals, Iden explained. They are searching for advanced civilization activity. Saran Vol rubbed his forehead. "So we need to make the system look empty." "Yes," Mara said. Counselor Serret looked shocked. "You cannot hide an entire capital world." "Not permanently," Mara replied, "but long enough to fool a machine that expects simple patterns." Admiral Kor crossed his arms. "What exactly do you suggest?" Mara pointed at the map. "We shut down everything." The room went silent. Saran blinked. "Everything. Every major power source," Mara said. "City grids, orbital stations, civilian transmissions, traffic beacons." Counselor Thex frowned. "That would cause panic." Mara shrugged slightly. "Better panic than extinction." Admiral Kor thought for a moment. How long would the shutdown last? 2 hours, Mara answered. "That's enough time for the probes to finish scanning." Saran still looked worried. "But what about the ships moving around the system?" Kor nodded. "That is a problem." Mara looked at the fleet markers. "Ships will have to hide." "Hide where?" She pointed toward the asteroid belt. "Rock fields. Shadow zones. Any place where the probes cannot easily detect power signatures." Counselor Serret looked uneasy. "You are telling an entire planetary system to pretend it does not exist." "Yes," Iden confirmed. "Historical analysis suggests 83% success probability." Saran laughed nervously. "That is not very comforting." Mara smiled slightly. "It is better than 0. Admiral Kor activated his command channel. "All fleet commanders listen carefully," he said. "Prepare for full system blackout. All non-essential power systems shut down immediately. Civilian authorities begin control power loss procedures." Across the map, messages spread through the system. Orbital stations dimmed. Communication towers powered down. Energy grids across the cities of Illyra Prime began shutting off one by one. From orbit, the bright lights of the capital world slowly faded. Within 30 minutes, the most advanced planet in the Alliance began to look like a dark, quiet rock. Saran watched the process on the display. "It feels strange," he said. Mara nodded. "Yes, like the galaxy holding its breath." Admiral Kor checked the probe signals again. "They are moving closer." One probe had reached the orbit of the gas giant. Another was drifting through the asteroid belt. 2 others were scanning the outer stations. The 5th probe was the closest. It was heading directly toward the inner planets, toward Illyra Prime. Iden monitored the signals carefully. "Probe number 3 has begun long-range analysis," it reported. Saran whispered, "Here we go." The chamber lights dimmed automatically. Even the war room system switched to low power. For a moment, the entire chamber felt quiet, like a tomb. Above them, the map showed the probe releasing scanning waves toward the planet. The invisible waves passed over Illyra Prime, over its cities, over its oceans, over its silent space stations. Everything remained dark. No energy, no signals, nothing that looked like a living civilization. Counselor Serret leaned forward. "Is it working?" I didn't watch the data carefully. Probe response uncertain. The red signal paused, then slowly turned away from the planet. Saran let out a breath. "It's leaving." But the relief lasted only a moment. Another probe suddenly changed direction. This one was coming from the asteroid belt, and it was moving faster. Much faster. Admiral Kor frowned. That one looked suspicious. Iden studied the signal. "Probe number 2 has detected gravitational anomalies." Mara looked up. "What kind of anomalies?" Iden zoomed the map. The probe was heading toward a region near the asteroid belt where several Alliance ships were hiding. Saran groaned. They found the fleet. Admiral Kor immediately opened the command channel again. All ships in Sector 8 powered down immediately. But it was too late. One small patrol ship had already fired its thrusters. The probe sensors locked onto the energy spike. The red signal accelerated instantly. Contact confirmed, Iden said calmly. The chamber filled with tension again. Saran whispered, "What happens now?" Iden answered, "The probe will approach the energy source." Admiral Kor clenched his fists. "We cannot let it transmit." Mara spoke quickly. "Send a decoy." "What?" "A drone," she said. "Something small with a strong power signature." Kor understood immediately. "You wanted to chase the drone instead of the fleet." "Yes." Admiral Kor gave the order. Within seconds, a small unmanned craft launched from a hidden station. Its engines burned bright. The drone raced away from the fleet, pulling the probe's attention. On the map, the red signal turned. It followed the drone. Saran sighed with relief. That worked. But Iden spoke again. Warning. Everyone looked up. Probe behavior changing. The red signal split. Two smaller signals appeared. Saran's heart sank. It divided. "Yes," Iden said. "Replication protocol activated." Admiral Kor cursed quietly. "How many can it split into?" "Unknown." The chamber grew tense again. Now 2 probes chased the drone. If they continued replicating, the deception plan would fail. Mara looked at the map. "We need to capture one." Saran blinked. "Capture it? With what?" Iden answered. "Human containment technology." The map shifted again. A hidden storage vault inside Chamber 9 opened on the display. Inside were strange devices shaped like large metallic rings. Counselor Thex looked confused. "What are those?" Mara smiled slightly. "Old human traps." Admiral Kor looked interested. "How do they work?" Iden explained. "They create a temporary electromagnetic cage around machine entities. The silence units rely on external signal coordination. Isolating them disrupts their behavior." Saran nodded slowly. "So if we trap one, then it cannot communicate with the swarm." Admiral Kor made a decision. "Deploy the trap." Within minutes, an Alliance frigate moved carefully from its hiding place. The ship carried one of the ancient human containment devices. The crew released a metal ring into space. It floated quietly in the probe's path. The drone continued racing forward. The probe followed. Closer, closer. Then the trap activated. A bright blue sphere flashed across the map. The probe's signal froze. Saran shouted, "It worked!" Admiral Kor allowed himself a small smile. One down. But Iden was still watching the other signals. 3 probes remained, and they were still searching. Meanwhile, deep beyond the outer edge of the system, something enormous moved through the darkness. The first wave of the silent swarm had begun its journey. Back in the chamber, Admiral Kor turned toward Mara. "The probes bought us time," he said. "But the real solution is still out there." He pointed to the distant symbol on the map. The Horizon engine. The ancient human weapon. Mara nodded slowly. "Yes." Saran asked quietly, "Do you really think it will work?" Mara looked up at the distant stars. Then she answered with simple honesty. "I think it is the only thing that might." Admiral Kor turned to the Council. "Prepare the expedition fleet." The mission would leave within the hour. Their destination was the edge of known space, and waiting there was a weapon humanity had been too afraid to use. But now, the galaxy had no choice, because the enemy that humanity once fought alone was coming back for everyone. The expedition fleet left the Illyra system in silence. No celebration, no speeches, no public broadcast, only a small group of ships moving into deep space, carrying the last hope of the Galactic Alliance. At the front of the fleet was the command cruiser Aegis Dawn, where Admiral Kor, Mara Ellian, Saran Vol, and Iden were gathered in the main control room, outside the observation window. The stars stretched into long lines as the fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. Their destination was far beyond normal space lanes. a region where almost no modern ship had traveled in centuries. The location of the ancient human weapon, the Horizon engine. Inside the cruiser, the atmosphere was tense but quiet. Everyone knew the truth. If the weapon failed, the silent swarm would eventually reach the core worlds of the Alliance, and nothing would stop it. Saran stood near the navigation console, watching the travel timer slowly count down. 2 more hours until we reach the coordinates, he said. Admiral Core nodded. Good. Mara stood beside the window, staring into the dark stretch of space ahead. She had been silent for most of the journey. Finally, Saran walked over to her. You look worried, he said. Mara gave a small, tired smile. I am. You built the weapon. Shouldn't that make you more confident? Mara shook her head. Humans built many weapons in our history, she said quietly. That does not mean we were always proud of them. Saran did not know what to say to that. At that moment, Iden spoke from the center of the room, approaching destination. The stars outside the window slowed. The fleet exited faster than light travel, and then everyone saw it, even from thousands of kilometers away. The Horizon engine looked enormous. The structure floated in the darkness like an artificial moon. Huge circular rings surrounded a glowing central core. Ancient metal towers stretched outward like the ribs of some giant machine. Parts of the station were damaged. Scars from an old war still marked the outer hull, but the structure was still alive. Soft lights moved slowly across its surface. Power still flowed through its systems. Saran stared in amazement. That thing has been waiting here for 800 years. Iden confirmed. Correct. Admiral Core studied the tactical display. No enemy activity nearby. None detected. That will change soon. The fleet slowly approached the station. Docking ports opened automatically as Iden transmitted the ancient access codes. Mara and the command team entered the station through a long metal corridor covered in old human writing. The air inside smelled stale, but breathable. Emergency lights flickered along the walls. It felt like walking through history. Saran ran his hand across one of the metal panels. This place feels lonely. Mara nodded. It was built during the final years of the war, she said. Most of the engineers probably never left. They reached the main control chamber. It was enormous, a circular room surrounded by massive control pillars. In the center stood the Horizon engine's activation console. 3 empty command stations waited in silence. Iden moved toward the console. Archive authority present. Admiral Core stepped forward. Alliance military authority present. The machine turned toward Mara. Human command authority required. Mara walked slowly toward the final station. Her hand hovered above the console. For a moment she hesitated. Saran noticed. What's wrong? He asked softly. Mara looked at the glowing control screen. Activating this weapon means we are choosing the same path humanity almost took 800 years ago. Admiral Core answered quietly. And if we do nothing? Mara already knew the answer. The silence would spread across the galaxy, planet by planet, city by city, just like before. She took a deep breath. Then she placed her hand on the console. Human command authority confirmed. The station woke instantly. The entire chamber filled with light. Deep inside the structure, ancient power systems began to roar back to life. The rings outside the station slowly started turning. Energy surged into the central core. Iden spoke calmly. Horizon engine initialization complete. Saran watched the readings carefully. What exactly will happen when it fires? Iden explained. The weapon will create a controlled gravitational collapse within a targeted region of space. Saran swallowed. You mean a black hole? Yes. Admiral Core looked at the star map. Can we choose a location? Yes. Then we place it far from inhabited systems. Mara nodded. Somewhere the swarm must travel through. Iden highlighted a narrow corridor between stars. This region is the most likely path for the incoming swarm. Admiral Core pointed. That's where we fire. The targeting sequence began. Outside the station, the rotating rings of the Horizon engine moved faster. Blue energy arcs stretched across the structure. The weapon was waking up for the first time in 800 years. Then Iden suddenly spoke again. New signal detected. Everyone turned toward the map. A massive red cloud appeared at the edge of the display. The silent swarm had arrived earlier than expected, thousands of dark objects moving together through deep space. Saran felt his breath catch. That's huge. Admiral Kor's voice was calm, large enough to destroy the Alliance. The swarm was moving straight toward the corridor they had targeted. Perfect timing, Mara said quietly. Iden began the final countdown. Horizon engine charging. 30 seconds. The energy inside the chamber became brighter. The air vibrated with power. Saran watched the approaching swarm. What if they change course? They won't, Mara said. Why? Because the swarm always follows the strongest signal. Iden confirmed. The Horizon engine's energy output is now the strongest signal in this region of space. The swarm accelerated, straight toward the trap. 10 seconds, Iden announced. Outside the station, the rings of the weapon glowed like small stars. 5 seconds. The swarm entered the target corridor. Admiral Kor nodded. Fire. The Horizon engine activated. A brilliant wave of energy shot outward from the station. Space itself twisted. Stars bent like reflections in water. Then the collapse began. A dark sphere formed in the center of the corridor. A newborn black hole. Its gravity pulled everything toward it. Asteroids, dust clouds, and the approaching silent swarm. The machines tried to escape, but the gravitational pull was too strong. Thousands of dark shapes were dragged into the singularity, one by one, then hundreds at once. Then entire waves of the swarm vanished into the darkness. Saran stared at the display in awe. It's working. Admiral Kor nodded slowly. Yes. The swarm continued falling into growing singularity. Within minutes, most of the red signals disappeared. The last remaining machines tried to turn away, but the gravity field caught them too. And then, the corridor was empty. The singularity slowly faded as the Horizon engine powered down. The weapon had done its job. The silent swarm was gone. For now, inside the chamber, no one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Saran broke the silence. We actually survived. Admiral Kor looked at Mara. Your ancestors built something terrifying. Mara nodded slowly. Yes. Saran looked at her. Why didn't humans ever tell the galaxy about this war? Mara gave a quiet answer. Because humanity hoped the galaxy would never have to fight it. Iden spoke one final time. The silence threat has been neutralized. Archive Black 7 mission complete. The lights in the chamber slowly dimmed. Outside the station, the stars looked peaceful again. But now the Alliance understood something they had never truly realized before. Humanity had once fought a war so dangerous. They buried the memory of it beneath their own history. And when the enemy returned, the humans had already prepared a way to stop it, not for themselves, but for the entire galaxy. End of story.